Hi, I'm Kathryn.
I'm Bree. I'm Sydney.
I'm Hector. Today our talk is on riparian trails in the context of the Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor at the University of Richmond.
Here's just a quick overview of our presentation for today. First, we'll go into a little bit of introduction and background on green space and riparian trails in general, and then we'll focus in on our actual study site. Then we will detail our methods that we use to collect our data, followed by an overall findings and suggestions for increased education at the Eco Corridor.
Natural vegetation is often used for a green space. However, in urban areas especially, there is an overall lack in vegetation. Therefore, in recent years, there has been an increase in the push for green spaces in these environments. Green spaces provide a number of benefits to humans, such as mental well-being, connection to nature, education in that it exposes people to water that might not have other exposure, and can serve as a place for physical exercise and recreation. We focused in on riparian trails, which are a form of green space. Riparian trails are trails that are near water bodies, and they support biodiversity, are a crucial habitat, and a water source for reproduction and or feeding for the local biota.
As previously mentioned, our study was focused on the Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor at the University of Richmond. Over the span of 2 years, UR's Office for Sustainability put forth extensive effort to construct the Gamble's Mill Eco Corridor and restore the Little West Ham Creek. Here in the slide, you can see a before image with plants overgrowing, trail covered up, to an after picture featuring a more cared for trail and vegetation. And the creek was restored in a way to make it a little bit more curvy than straight, which allows for the water to move slower, improves stormwater management, and then just makes it more suitable for wildlife on the campus. And as this was constructed, there was a new paved trail that was made and the removal of invasive species. If we take a look at the maps provided, we can see that as we go from the top left, following it counterclockwise, the maps are getting progressively more zoomed out, just so that we can kind of see where the Little West Ham Creek and the Eagle Corridor are in context of the James River watershed. Of course, the first map, is the green is the trail. The purple is the creek. In the map to the right of it, you can see it in the top left in context of where it enters into the James River. In the bottom right one, we can see where it is in the city of Richmond. And then if we see on the bottom left where it is in the James River watershed as a whole.
To collect data, researchers sat at the trailhead for 30-minute increments and recorded the assumed gender, the activity, the assumed age group, either children, student, adult, or elderly, and whether or not the people were in a group or alone. We also made sure to count each passerby only once to avoid repetition of data, so we made a note as people passed in order to not count them again as they left. To avoid different judgment calls, such as their age group, the same two students did all of the observations, and the data was again collected to create a better understanding of who is using the Eco Corridor and why. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we decided it was best to not directly interact with the users and instead observe from a distance on the side of the trail. We tried to collect data at different times of day and during different weather conditions to get a better understanding of the trail's usage. So we did 2 weekdays and 2 weekend days to try and encompass different times of the week. And for this study, we considered Friday to be a weekend day because most college courses go from Monday through Thursday. So most students on campus don't have classes on Friday and would consider Friday to be a weekend day. Unfortunately, due to the limited time, we were unable to get a large breadth of data. However, there were some interesting insights, like the second largest amount of people on Sunday, even though the weather was humid and rainy, and also the least amount of people on Monday during mid-afternoon with sunny and warm weather. This illustrates how the usage of the Eco Corridor does vary by time of day and day of the week, and more leaning towards the time of day, as Tuesday had the largest amount of people in the afternoon, and the weekends had not as many people as were expected. These first two graphs show the demographics of our observed users, so we want to get an overall understanding of who was using the Eco Corridor of the different data collection points. And on the left, we have a mix of weekend and weekday, which is important because during the weekdays, students have classes, so there'd be a disparity between how many students visit during a weekday, which is evident on the left. Also on the right, you can see how adults dominate the amount of results, as 50% of the people visiting the Eco Corridor were adults. It was also interesting to note that only 29% of people at the Eco Corridor were students, as the Eco Corridor purpose was for the recreation and relaxation of students on a college campus. Further, I just want to point out that children were not that frequent, and the majority of them were on a Sunday, along with adults.
If we take a look at figure 4, we could see that the majority was definitely female rather than male, with 84 users being female and only 57 being male. Next, we wanted to see in figure number 5 if more people were in groups or alone, and clearly there were more people using the trail in groups rather than using it alone. There also appears to be a shift towards more women using the trail in groups than men. However, there's no significance in this relationship, so further research would be needed to really establish that.
Our final graph illustrates the observed usages of the eco-corridor. Although we saw users engaging in a number of activities, walking is clearly the most common activity, followed by biking. Overall, people seem to be using the eco-corridor for physical activity rather than relaxing and recreation. Now we just want to tie all our findings together and bring it back to riparian trails, as well as put forth some suggestions for the university to enable further community engagement with the water source. A similar study conducted by a previous student at the university observed that on average there are about 35 users per hour. However, we observed that on average there are about 56 users per hour, indicating that the usage of the eco-corridor may be increasing or that there are seasonal differences, which further studies would need to analyze. Additionally, most of the usage appears to be for exercise use rather than recreational use, which is an interesting finding as the university does promote this space as a recreational and relaxation space. Just to tie all this back to riparian trails, education is a key benefit of having these trails located near a water source, and the university has taken steps to educate the eco-corridor users about the water. As seen in this image, there's 2 signs at the water crossings at the eco-corridor. However, a majority of the users were adult women, indicating that they were the main ones getting that education rather than the University of Richmond's students. From our findings, we have a couple of suggestions for the university's engagement with the water source. Overall, there should be targeting to other age groups to use the eco-corridor as adults were dominating our sample. Additionally, there are very few places to sit next to the water source at the eco-corridor, so we suggest that implementing benches at the water could increase activity. Additionally, there should be more signage indicating the importance of water source. At the entrance of the eco-corridor, there is a spring pond that could have signage to indicate what that is. Lastly, we suggest that there should be path offshoots that hug the bank of the Little West Ham Creek.